Hey, this is Warren Redlick. I'm here with Sam. Am I pronouncing it right? Haroun? I didn't even ask you this before we went on. Sam
Yes,
Haroun.
yes, yes.
Sam contacted me. I reached out to the audience and I said, hey, by the way, if there's any audio problems, please tell me. Jeff, I see you're watching. If anybody sees any audio problems or thinks we need to fix something, we'll get that started at the beginning. Um, so I like talking to people from the audience and other people who aren't in the audience yet necessarily about topics related to Tesla, related to SpaceX, related to Neuralink, related to the Boring Company. We just did the Boring Company yesterday. Um, so, um, hello, BLKN Sexy 10. Can you hear everything? Are we okay? Audio's good. Thank you, Thaddeus. So, um, Sam reached out to me saying he would love to talk about a subject, and the subject he was interested in is how Tesla can make a difference in third world countries. Sam is particularly interested in Egypt. So, Sam, you're in London, Ontario, Canada right now. Is that close?
Correct.
Okay, so you're
Yes.
Sam's in Canada. I'm in Florida. We both have reliable power supply. We both have good transportation available to us, right, Sam? But
Yes.
in third world countries, and Egypt in particular, for your what you wanted to talk about, it's my impression that I definitely am aware that there's power reliability issues in, say, Costa Rica is a country that I follow. And they have a lot of power outages. And I traveled in Costa Rica, and transportation is, let's just say, not so easy if you don't have money. So
Mhm.
how did you come to this issue being important? What motivates you about this issue? Transportation and energy in the third world.
If I can go back, I came to Canada in like 31 years ago. Uh, I was 21 at that time. I haven't had all my schooling and university in Egypt. And in Cairo in particular, I was there for 4 years during university. And um, seeing firsthand how transportation is like in there and seeing the efficiency and the inefficiencies of it. Um, Later, I first time I had a car was here in North America. None of like say my parents never had a car growing up, and now getting used to things here in North America, but also having my background how things like back in Egypt and similar countries. So um, I became interested in transportation in general, or not transportation, efficiencies in general. Um, Probably 2007. That's when I leased the first car. Like I had a previous car that was with us before, but then first time I leased a brand new car was a smart car. And actually, I went and made the deal, and I realized that I was driving it when I was driving home. I never even test drive. Like I had a car and I was interested in that, and so whenever the car I had stopped working, I went directly to the dealership and found out if they had any used ones, and they found that's not a thing to happen, like to be was available. And then so I leased this one, and then later I leased another one, and then from that I went into Prius C, which is a smaller
This is all
of
Canada, right?
the Prius.
Okay.
Yes. Uh, but so like here in Canada, I became interested in the efficiencies and all that, but having all the time my thinking was okay, in Egypt things will be completely different than it is here. So um, and then more recently I became interested in the Tesla community, and through Twitter I've been engaging some in there, and that's how I got to know about Warren and his channel and the videos he does, and some other channels that I follow. But then I realized most of the thinking of the people in the Tesla community is all based on North
Yes.
America.
Yes. No, I don't want to say. I want
And
a lot of it. Yes. Yes.
yes, and then if we think of like there's a big population out there, and people would imagine that if here in North America the population is XYZ and other country is, or the rest of the world is, 10 times as that, then we would think that sales would explode. But when you realize, okay, no, this is not the case, because how much is the income in there, and what are the people, what is their priorities and what they are interested in, and it becomes a different picture. So obviously in Egypt, way back 30 years ago, most people depended on mass transportation and buses in particular. And then there was minibuses and there was vans or minivans. Again, comparison between, when I say the word vans in North America, you would think of a Dodge or a Honda one. They are very plush inside and you can put like 7 people. But in the Middle East, you get a van and you have 12 people in it.
Right, and it's is it usually a Toyota?
Yes. Now, brand names for North America was like, it almost becomes like a luxury brand because you don't see it. Like a Ford in there will be like, whoa, somebody got a Ford. Just it becomes. But the brands that were available in Egypt was like Toyota, Hitachi, Isuzu, like all the Japanese ones, and then also some stuff from Europe.
So one of the things about that, I traveled in the Caribbean some because I live in Florida, and it seems very common that you see, because we're talking about, and they're sort of like, just to start off with, we're talking about, quote, the third world, which has a pejorative sense for people who live in America. There's like a blend, some places are worse off than others, and some parts of the Caribbean aren't so bad. But one of the things I definitely noticed in the Caribbean was a large number of Japanese vehicles. And I believe there's a reason for why we see so many Japanese vehicles in, quote, third world countries, is because in Japan, after 10 years, it's very hard. At a certain point in a Japanese car's life, the cost of getting the inspections to keep the vehicle on the road is very high. So they sell them into the used car market, and they get transported to third world countries and sold there, where the inspection regime isn't the same. So I think that's a part of the reason why you don't see brand new Toyotas so much in third world countries. You see 10-year-old Toyotas.
Well, in there, rust issues is never, like, I never knew about rust in cars until I came here to North America.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, the first time I visited Egypt, back after I've been here, it was after 10 and a half years. And it looked to me that the buses that were there when I left, they are still, and actually they were old when I left. I found they were still running the same, but it looked like they were painted with like a paint roller or something, like any way to just keep it going.
Right.
But whether it's new or, definitely used cars in there. Like if somebody had a car that's 10 years old and have, like 200,000, like they would talk about it, like to them, they got it new, so it's as if it's a new car. Okay,
so let's focus on transportation. So I'm in the United States. You're in Canada. In Ontario, I think in London, Ontario, you probably have pretty good, some form of mass transit, buses and maybe some trains, right? Some limit. In Toronto definitely has extensive transit.
Ontario, London, Ontario, it's more like kind of, because way back before I came here, the idea with then is everything goes to downtown. So you get all downtown is the hub, and then everything goes from there. Sometimes in some areas, one part that will take me 10 minutes by car, if I need the transit, it will be 1 hour, because I have to take either one bus all the way downtown and then come back, or I can have to make like 3 buses to get there. So like in that part, in that way, it's not efficient.
Right.
Another inefficiency here in North America, for example, trains, like in between cities. I see the train goes, and a lot of times I feel like 4 cars, and then most likely they are even empty. Mm-hmm. And part of it is everybody had got their own car, or if they're going to go somewhere, I need my car in there as well. So either they're going to go and rent, or I might as well drive. So the companies that's running the trains, they are not getting enough ridership.
Right.
So But Europe, I understand it's common for people to use mass transit, but then at the same time, people are not spread out like here in North America.
Right. So, well, I lived in Japan and I've traveled in Europe, and they have much better mass transit than the United States. I think one of the things here in the United States, and to some extent Canada, is very similar. We're just wealthier. We just have that much more money, that much more resources. Look, I got 2 cars in the garage. We don't even drive that much. We just, I have an Volkswagen Passat I bought for $18,000 a couple of years ago. We have a Mazda CX-9, fairly large SUV that we bought when we had more money, and we just don't drive that many miles. But we're just used to it. And if there was a transit system, and we are spread out. I'm in the suburbs. I'm out in the I'm on the edge of the Everglades. So if I wanted to take a bus to get somewhere, I'd have to walk 20 minutes to get to the main road, and then that bus would not go many places, and I'd have to change buses at least once. But I wanted to get to, so I think most of the viewers know what life is like in North America, or maybe to some extent in first world Europe, let's say. But I think a lot of us do not understand what life is like in poorer countries. So like when I was in the Caribbean, now keep in mind, in the Caribbean, the islands are fairly small, mostly. So travel isn't, Egypt is much, much bigger than the typical Caribbean island. And their cities aren't as populated in the Caribbean as they are like Cairo. Am I pronouncing that right, Cairo?
Yes, yeah. Yes.
So I wanted to ask you to give us some perspective of what is transportation like. Like I was talking with, sorry, it wasn't me. I was watching Hyperchange a couple days ago. He was talking with a guy who's from India, or families from India.
Yeah, I've seen that interview. I still didn't get the name either.
Viva something. So he was talking about what transportation. There's a lot of 2-wheel transportation. There's these 3-wheelers. What is transportation like in, let's say, Cairo? I assume Cairo is the biggest city in Egypt by far, right?
Yeah.
So what is transportation like for the average? Not talking about the guy who's got $1 million in the bank and has a chauffeur driving him around, but for the average working class person in Cairo, what is transportation like there?
Typically, mass transportation. And as I mentioned, it's either you take the bus, so that would be one way, or buses. But then the other, like an upgrade from that and faster, will be the minivans, and then the vans. That would be, and then the van system. This is how it works. You got hubs through the whole city, and you either gonna take it from the beginning of the hub, or somewhere, like they have a certain route they always take, and not everybody is going to be taken from the beginning of the hub to the end of the hub. So from the beginning to the end of the route. So a lot of times people would come off, but somebody who is on the route would flag it and then take it from there as well. And I can't I think it was a flat rate either way. And
what does it cost? Is it like $1 or $2?
The cost is ridiculous low.
Yeah.
And now things are changing. Like right now, Egypt for me is completely foreign. Prices has completely changed. As a matter of fact, in one day, the price of the dollar changed by double in Egypt, and that's because they floated the currency. So that was back in 2016. But regardless,
but I mean, if I'm getting on a bus, if I'm getting on a minibus or a bus in Egypt, is it going to cost me at 25 cents? Is it going to cost me $1? How much is it going to cost me for a trip?
It could be, as you said, like 25 cents if you're comparing it to North America.
Yeah.
Because right now, like $1 in Egypt would be like 16 Egyptian pounds. So if somebody would say, "Oh, like it's $3 or £3," like like to us in here would be like
that's 20 cents.
This is pocket change,
right?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, like even like I think last time I was there, I took a train from Alexandria to Cairo, which is about 200 kilometers, and I think it was like 80 pounds.
I think that's 120 miles for my American friends. 200 kilometers.
Yeah, sorry about
so
that.
It's
yeah.
80 pounds, which is like $5.
Yeah, like, so that's not even like in here. That would be taking the taxi.
You couldn't even get it. You couldn't even get a taxi for $5 anywhere.
Like just
half a mile would cost more than $5 in a taxi.
To open the door in the taxi is $5. Yeah. And so another thing too that was happening as I'm growing up, things are changing now, and I'm not keeping track of it. In there is subsidies. Take it away from transportation for a moment. Growing up, like in there, we have the pita bread would be or similar to that, and it was basically a penny for one.
A penny for what?
For one pita bread.
Okay.
And so, like prices, like in here, like I'm talking about way back then, and even now, like still, even though things are like people in there, you might find like it is doubling or tripling overnight, but there's a big difference in between what the price was in the first place. So even after doubling, the people in here would be ridiculously low.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, okay, if I were to go and live in there and get the income that's there, then it becomes completely different.
Right. Well, the incomes are lower too.
Yes.
Right.
So that is so a low price to somebody in there. No, like otherwise, like everybody would forget about the buses and take those vans or whatever. But no, that would be extravagant living to some people. Like if every day I'm taking this one, if I know I can take it for like half of the cost.
Are there
another thing?
Go ahead.
I watched one of your videos when you were talking about, and you use different cities, talk about the transportation. If I take a bus or if I take a Robotaxi and so forth. One thing I saw that you didn't do in your presentation, and that is, what is the monthly membership to have?
A monthly pass.
Or a monthly pass. Yeah, sorry, I was forgetting that word. So, in one sense, like here in London, I think it is $2.75, $2 Canadian, 2.75 for one ticket on the bus. But for the whole month, I think it is like $81. And so it's completely different in making the calculation. If somebody's going to be using the bus here in North America, they'll be okay. I'll be using the bus pass, and I know my whole cost for the month is like say $100, or in a bigger city might be $200.
Okay, but I want to break down the transit options in Cairo right now. So you have trains to go from city to city, like Alexandria. You have larger buses, and you have vans and minivans or whatever taking people around. There must be some taxis, small vehicles. Are there people driving motorcycles and scooters and three-wheel vehicles? Is that something that happens in Egypt or not so much? Because apparently it's big in India.
Add to that, sometimes you can find carts with donkeys.
Yeah.
Still, in some areas, you might find like it is a lot less than before, but everything could happen in a third world country.
I mean, in terms of, if I'm walking down the street, on Main Street in Cairo, am I seeing a lot of motorcycles? Am I seeing a lot of scooters? Am I mostly seeing vans? What's on the road?
No, the vans you're going to find a lot. Motorcycle might be less than, like say in the pictures in the past, you'd think of like China or whatever, and you see pictures, everything was bicycles. Now it's kind of everything becoming cars, like in China. In Egypt, you find like probably all of the above, but then also people walking in the streets. Like you don't find, like here in North America, you got lanes, and you got, here is the area where the sidewalks or whatever. Yeah, in there, like lines for lanes in Egypt inside the cities, it's waste of paint.
So let me turn to this issue about how Tesla can make a difference in transportation in Cairo. It sounds to me like transportation for individuals is already very inexpensive, because the picture I have is we create a Robotaxi network and you can get a ride for, $1 a mile. Well, it doesn't sound like that's going to persuade a lot of Cairo citizens to get out of their van and hop in a Tesla, if that's the option.
No, because here's the one thing is in here, Robotaxi would make a sense from a point of view is what is the cost for a driver?
Yeah.
While in Egypt, like in Egypt, no, the bigger cost for the car itself, and then I can just get a guy to drive it, and it's almost like very small percentage of the income will be paid to that person.
Well, the point is that the Robotaxi software replaces the expensive driver is very valuable in a place like the United States or Europe where drivers are expensive. But in countries where drivers are inexpensive, that value is not that much. And then, so this is where I think the Tesla minibus, which I think you wanted to talk about, comes in. I'm going to be doing a video in the future. It's probably going to be a few weeks because I have a couple other ones I want to do first. But I've started working on a video, at least outlining a video about a Tesla minibus. Elon Musk said in the master plan part 2, my French is terrible, the second master plan, he referenced some sort of mass transit vehicle. And the general sense, it might be on a Model X chassis or maybe a Cybertruck chassis, if there is such a thing as a Cybertruck chassis, that they would build something that would be able to carry 12 or 16 passengers. And as an EV, it would be less expensive in terms of fuel, and it would be less expensive in terms of maintenance compared to a gas-powered vehicle. But again, in Egypt, they're using 10-year-old plus minivans, and the cost of fuel is not that high when you spread it over 10 people in the vehicle. So,
yes, correct.
But now I guess this comes to a question that I know is an issue in India and an issue in China. Is the air very polluted in Cairo because of all these inefficient old vehicles driving around, or is it not that bad?
No, I would say that, especially too, like I'm used to a smaller city in here. Like even going to Toronto for me, it's more like more pollution or more haze.
Yeah.
In Egypt, we got two types of pollution. One is from carbon monoxide and all the stuff emission comes from cars, but then you get dust as well.
Sure.
And the dust is not just from the desert, but also from constructions that everywhere. Like say my sister, for example, her apartment, say in the third floor, you can clean the tiles. Next day, you put a line on it, and you can write on it, and on the floor.
And that's
just from the amount of dust.
That's particulate matter that's in the air that you're breathing in as you're walking down the street in Cairo.
Yes.
And is that problem worse?
Some of it is from the exhaust, and some of it just from the tires moving and stirring up dust.
Right, but is the dust a bigger problem than the diesel fumes, or is it about even, or is it hard to say?
Well, I would say it's about even.
Okay. So I guess in a sense what I see is the value proposition for Tesla vehicles. Yeah, exactly, Thaddeus. That's exactly where I'm heading, Thaddeus. The value proposition for robotaxis, even for the minibus, is higher in places like the United States and wealthy countries, because displacing the driver adds more value, saves us more money. Our fuel costs might be higher than they are in Egypt. So the value of, because there's a clear proposition for how they're going to help our transportation system here. Like I was talking yesterday with Will from the Boring Revolution about whether we might see boring company tunnels in India because travel can be so difficult there. But it seems like, okay, for us, $10 million a mile to bore a tunnel, that doesn't seem, or actually I think we're down to $7, maybe $5 million a mile to bore a tunnel. But maybe that's too expensive for a third world country to justify, the value you're going to get from all the rides going through the tunnel might not add up to $5 million very quickly.
That will be a value to fix a city in there.
Well, I mean, if the government decides to subsidize construction of the tunnels to help with whatever problems, that's great. And in a sense, I almost wonder if the tunnels would be better for your breathing, because you're not going to have the dust and the fume problems, because you're not going to have gas-powered vehicles in the tunnels, and you're not going to have dust kicked up in the tunnels. So I almost think that life might be better in the tunnels than it is above ground in Egypt, if it's that bad.
But in any situation, we have to look at, like, in one side, zero in on the details, but not lose focus on the big picture.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we do one or the other.
Yeah.
So if the whole thing could be solved, like if we are looking on, like, say, reducing use of fossil fuel. So if I can find it in, or do it in a way where don't have to change the whole infrastructure and so forth, and will accomplish the purpose, then that should be fine on the big picture. But on the other hand,
well, let me just cut you off for a second, because Thaddeus said this, and I wanted to follow up on this point.
Sure.
It almost sounds to me like Tesla will be very successful in first world countries like the United States, Canada, Australia, Europe, Japan, maybe China will be very successful in certain places. And then 10 years from now, or 5, at a certain point, some of the Teslas, the batteries drop down to 80% or 70% of capacity. And it's not in as great shape as it was before. And rather than, recycling everything, it just gets shipped to Egypt. It just gets shipped to a Caribbean country where they don't mind that it only has 70% of battery capacity, and they'll ride it down to 50% or 40% battery capacity. And they'll, like they're currently using I hate to say it, they're using our leftovers for transportation now. I could see where, as we stop using gas vehicles and we start using EVs, our leftover EVs will eventually penetrate third world markets.
That's definitely would be a possibility. Here's another thing that, like in here, when we think of cost and all that, we're all thinking, first of all, from the perspective, I would have a car for personal use. And the car is made that way. It is made plush and very comfortable and so forth. But at the same time, like, I have a car from the car I currently drive. It is from 2014. And right now, I think I only drove about like 46,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
And that's including some long trips.
Yes, that's because we have a 2013 Mazda in the garage. Yes.
Yeah. And so most of the time, our cars here are parked. Now, not true. Like some people, you do a lot of commuting. I don't. But in, like, say, bigger city like Toronto or a lot of bigger cities in North America, you have like an hour, maybe an hour and a half every day you're commuting, but after that the car is parked.
Right.
While in third world countries, the idea of having a vehicle, like, you got very small percentage who are wealthy and will be similar to here. And the fact, as a matter of fact, they'll be not just wanting to get the average car, they'll be wanting a Tesla or the Mercedes or whatever big name because it speaks of their status.
To show off. It's a status thing, yes.
Yes. But for the majority of the people, you would ignore all that and look at it as, okay, I need to transport from A to B. How can we retrofit this thing? So my experience seeing how even the vans and all that, the transition of that happened when I was younger. In the past, people didn't drive much. And then, like, I'm talking about 40 years ago. And then I've seen they were getting pickup trucks. And as you mentioned, like Toyota, I mentioned Toyota. As a matter of fact, like, people refer to any of them as Toyota in Egypt. And they would they put 2 benches at the back, and then they cut the tailgate, and then they make a door in there, and then they put a frame, and then, like, the beginners, they did like a canvas thing, and you put like 10 people at the back, 5 on each side, and and then you'd have to knock on the window or whatever for the driver
To stop.
to know that you want to stop or whatever. And then whenever they stop, and he would get to know. And then I think sometimes he'd open the window in between the driver and the people at the back, and people pass the fare to the driver. Or sometimes he would have a kid at the back, and he's the one conducting the fares.
Right.
I'm not promoting child labor, but it's
reality in the third world.
Correct. And then so that was the first thing, and then later on they start doing like a paneling instead of canvas and all that. And then later the advent of minivans that came in, and again I'm repeating that minivan in there is completely different than here.
Right, but I want to get to this point. You were making I want to get to a point you were making there, which is, in our world, we're used to owning cars and having them sit in the garage. But the world that I see coming here in the United States and in Canada and other wealthy countries is the value proposition of having a robotaxi network, where it will, initially it's going to be $1 a mile, and then after it gets some market penetration, it's going to drop down to 50 cents a mile, and then eventually, as we improve efficiency and as the market gets saturated, I think we might get the cost per mile down to say 25 cents or less for people to use a robotaxi. And once you drop below, even at $1 a mile, there's a lot of people in the United States who are spending more than $1 a mile for their vehicle. And there's a convenience factor as well, that you'll never have to go to a gas station. If you're a passenger in a robotaxi, you never have to go to a gas station again. You never have to go get an oil change. You never have to go replace your windshield wipers. All that stuff is taken care of by the robotaxi owner or the robotaxi network. It just goes where it needs to go for maintenance. So it simplifies. You never have to worry about where you parked. You get dropped off at the front door. You get picked up at the front door. So a lot of conveniences. So the future that I see for Tesla is not, I'm going to have a Tesla in my garage and it's sitting there except for an hour or two a day. The future that I see for Tesla is the robotaxi network. That this is something I've advanced in other videos. I believe Tesla is going to stop selling cars to consumers. It will not make sense for consumers to buy Teslas to have them sit in the garage, because the value of them being out in the robotaxi network is so great that Tesla will have to charge $200,000 for a Model 3 or a Model Y, because that's how much money they'll make with the Model 3 or Model Y. So, but where I was going with this is, with the prices that people are paying for transportation in Cairo, even if you delivered a robotaxi that got the cost down to 25 cents a mile, that still wouldn't be cheap enough to win customers over from their current transportation options.
True, but at the same time, like, subsidy makes a big difference. I know in Egypt for sure, and then in probably other countries is the same thing. So by the time I left Egypt, I think at that time the price of gasoline was 0.35 of a pound, and I think at that time $1 was maybe like 2 pounds or something like that. Now all the prices have changed, or all the currency exchange changed. But as you were floating the currency in Egypt, part of it, because they had to, or the reason they had to do it, is for them to get a certain loan from the monetary fund,
International Monetary Fund, IMF,
Monetary Fund. Yeah, they had to, like, I think they told them, okay, you can't just continue subsidizing everything, and then all of a sudden they start taking some of the subsidy off, and then some people saying, like, and then you look at it as the government, as if it's the government charging more, but in reality, no, the government is taking less from what they were putting in before. And so the prices might even, like, it change a lot just simply because some of the subsidy because a car in there will take the same amount of fuel that it takes in here. It might appear to them cheaper because it's being subsidized, but when you make it, it is the same price. So then all of a sudden, no, just for me to move the car. Now it became, like for their money, will be I'm using, 300 Egyptian pounds, like just for so many hours, and it's big, huge inflated price. But in here will be okay.
Okay, just
I'm talking about $5.
just really quick, I think it's Pena or Pena, who's by the way is in Canada. He said, "Why can't governments fund Robotaxi in the beginning?" Ben, I think my answer to that is governments don't need to fund Robotaxi. Robotaxi is going to fund itself. It's going to be highly competitive. It's going to displace Uber and Lyft are dead. Uber and rental cars, Hertz and all the rental car companies, they're dead. They're dead men walking. So the minute that the Robotaxi network goes live, the cost per mile of riding at a Robotaxi and the convenience factor is going to outweigh everything else. And until the market gets saturated with Robotaxis, which will take a while, it will be so competitive that it won't need any government funding. And there probably was some initial government subsidy to Tesla at some point to do their initial early research or other early research in electric vehicles. But and so turning to this third world question, the market for the Robotaxi network for Tesla EVs is so strong in wealthy countries that I think it's going to take time for Tesla vehicles to make a significant dent in third world countries, because like just what it was Vivas Kumar, by the way, thank you to Thaddeus for saying this. Vivas Kumar was the interview about India. The regulatory structure in these countries, the size of the market, the Egyptian market is much smaller than the American or the European market. India is a very, very difficult place to do business. So I think it will take a long time for Tesla to penetrate third world countries, because the rich countries are low-hanging fruit. They're going to chase the easy money first. And unless a third world government comes along and says, hey, we've got really bad air quality, we really want to fix this, and we're willing to bring in an outsider to help us fix our problem, which is very, in my experience, that's not the way third world countries think. Third world countries are not in the government. Let me rephrase that. The governments in third world countries are not interested in the welfare of the people. They're interested in money in their pockets. I'm sorry to be, I hope I'm not being unfair there.
I'm going to address this in a indirect way. Like talk about even prices. Because coming here to North America, and as I mentioned, the first time I could afford, or actually it was my first time working because I was a student until I came here. So now I'm working and I have an income that I can afford a car. But thinking back home in Egypt, and then I make a calculation and say, okay, so by their money, my car in there will, it sounds like this is will be a price for a house.
Yes.
And then I would imagine, so how people are getting cars in there in the first place. But in one of my trips to Egypt, talking to somebody, and then he explained something. He said, how those people are getting the cars, talk about those drivers of the vans that are using for mass transportation. He said Toyota is making them a deal that they are paying 100 Egyptian pounds a day.
Paying who?
Like when they are, whether the dealership or whatever place that they are renting or getting the lease from. Which again, that was before the prices have changed in the last 4 years in Egypt. But while the prices still sounded expensive, but when you consider that somebody's using that van to shuttle back and forth in between cities, and then when you calculate, okay, so he puts 12 passengers in this and then making that trip and back and so forth, you realize, okay, the money adds up. So even though it sounds expensive, but if you're going to use the car actually for transportation rather than it's just a luxury item to own and leave parked, then you're comparing, okay, how much does the whole project cost and how much is the whole income from that will cost, which is the way you're thinking at it when you're talking about the robotaxis and so forth. So in part, as the transition happens in here, and we here in North America think of cars as transportation rather than just an item to own, because in the places like Egypt, like the buses that we had to like say for me to go to my home from my hometown to Cairo, were Mercedes buses. So whether they were new or used, it is a big ticket item. But the way that bus was used, as a matter of fact, by the time I left Egypt, in between my hometown and Cairo, you can book and pay in advance for a bus every half hour. So like 1 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock, and so forth. And then there's another bus that you can just walk in and get in it and then pay in the way. And that's every 15 minutes. So basically every hour there are 4 buses that was in between my hometown and Cairo, which is about 100 kilometers away. And all of them are full, and sometimes some people standing. And here, when we think of a bus from between cities, most of the time the bus might have, 10 people and the rest of the seats are empty.
So I'm sorry. There's a comment that I wanted you to address. This is from Bored Cat, and Bored Cat says, third world countries have their markets controlled mostly by the U.S. We buy what they allow us to buy. Also, corruption. I'm guessing Bored Cat then is living in a third world country. Also, corruption in third world country is a big tool for big countries to control them. So I don't have the impression that the United States controls Egypt's markets. I think the United States tries to influence a lot of the world in a lot of ways, but I don't think we're very good at controlling things. And I mean, what's your sense of that? Do you think that the United States controls third world markets? Do you think we only let Egypt buy what we allow Egypt to buy?
I wouldn't see it happens this way. If control happens, it might just how the whole game or how the whole economy is happening. Because even if I look at the local economy here, whether in your city or my city, some people or some jobs become needed just because there are some other people are doing this and this and this, and then this job becomes needed. So just because how the whole game is played, or not game, like maybe this sounds like somebody's, how the whole, like as people in general trying to solve their local situation, maybe this is a better way to say it, there are some things that become needed. And I need to be fair to people in government, but at the same time, I know there is corruption and all that happens. I wouldn't say seeing it beforehand. But for example, my sister made a joke a while ago, and she was saying, Egypt is one of the richest countries in the world. And I knew it was a joke. So I said, like, how so? She said, people in the government have been stealing for 40 years and still money available.
That's right.
So that's how the impression of people are like in there. Another way about like control that happens, again, going back to jokes, just to see the vibe of how people think in there. In my first visit back, and that was in 1999, I heard 2 jokes that would kind of give the impression of how it was like. Back then, the country was, the leader has been the president for, I think, 20 years by that time. And it seemed like it was him and his sons or whatever. And so the joke was the Minister of Finance went to the president and told him, like, I don't know what to do with your son anymore. He said, what's the issue? He said he wants one of those apartments that we have for the youth. He said, isn't he a young person? Give him the apartment. And that apartment was in City A. And then the same day, the same situation happened again, but now it was in the City B, completely like several hundred kilometers away. And then the third day, he's coming and said, I don't know what to do with your son anymore. He said, like, what's the issue this time? He said, he wants to open the 2 apartments together. So that's, so the joke kind of summarizes how the vibe of how people in the countries feel. But at the same time, if I were to put myself in the place of whoever, whether it's a government on the right or on the left, the whole situation, like sometimes we oversimplify things and we think if I'm just there, the whole thing will be, until I start looking into some details and realize like, no, like there are a lot of challenges there. And I know that you were thinking of more details of things because you were running for an office before, and you probably ran a lot of scenarios on your in your mind. And so hopefully I'm not disappointing the person who asked
Well,
or who made comments.
Board Cat came back and said Latin America is very, apparently Board Cat was referring to Latin America,
Yeah.
which is probably more true than, say, Egypt or India.
Yeah.
That the United States definitely tries to influence. But let's change subjects a little bit. We were talking about vehicle transportation, and I think we're probably agreeing that the main way that Tesla might infiltrate or start playing a role in some third world markets like Egypt is when the vehicles get older and become less useful in their home markets. They might travel to third world countries, just like we see with Toyota minivans. So let's talk about energy, the electric grid. I traveled in I'm fascinated with Costa Rica, unreasonably so. I just think the country's got a lot of promise, and I probably don't know what I'm talking about, but I did visit there once. And my understanding is that Costa Rica has a very unreliable electric grid, that the power goes out sometime, you never know when your power is going to go out, and you don't know how long it's going to be out. Where, like, I live in Florida, and our power goes out once or twice a year, and you can go on, your phone still works, and you can go on the FPL, the Florida Power and Light website, and you can see how big the outage is and how long it is before they think they're going to have it fixed, which is not how it works in third world countries. There's nowhere to go to find out what's going on. So could you describe what the electrical grid is like in terms of what the individual consumer's experience is with electricity in, say, Cairo, or what's your home? You mentioned your hometown. What is that?
It's called El Fayoum.
Okay,
and it's about 100 kilometers away. Yeah.
So what is the electrical grid like for the average resident of Egypt?
Growing up, outages happened commonly. Like we had lamps or whatever where we'd have to use, and then propane device that we'd light up and so forth. And it was a common thing. Like, we had to know all the time where the candles are, where the matches are, and so forth, because we're going to need it. Things have improved a lot. Like, in my recent visits, it doesn't happen that way.
I was just going to say, things have improved a lot. We have flashlights now.
True, but the frequencies of it has improved a lot. And in part is probably what was happening in the past is there was not enough power production compared to the demand. So as a matter of fact, like, the outages or whatever probably were happening because, like, it's rolling blackouts where, okay, we're going to give this area for a while and this area for a while and so forth. And sometimes the other aspect to add to that was infrastructure itself is bad. So, like, if something blew up or something, then it's going to take a while to fix whatever transformer or something that needed fixing. Similar to that, we had issue with water. Running water, it was a nightmare for us. Like, and then if you're in a higher apartment, then you got the pressure so weak, and then the people start using pumps within the first floor, and then it became, you might be in the second or third floor, but now you're not getting water because the people who are in the higher floor, they have a pump, and it's kind of whatever water is available, it will pump it to them, and you'll get nothing. And then it became, you walk into the neighborhood and you're hearing all those pumps screaming everywhere.
Yeah.
And then that's more also becomes energy usage and so forth.
Right. So what you were saying, though, is that there wasn't enough electricity production to meet demand. Has Egypt increased energy? Is Egypt using nuclear power? Are they using natural gas? Are they using coal? What are the main sources of electricity that their generation that they've got?
Okay, I would say the main. I don't know percentages, but I know they had a big dam in
sure.
south of Egypt, and then probably fossil fuel, whether it's gas or
probably not. It's probably not coal, right? It's probably gas or oil.
Probably yes. Uh, However, growing up and as a kid, and you kind of believe what the school told us, and like we were so proud of having this Aswan Dam and so forth, and our impression that everything in Egypt was running on that until later on, like as a you realize no, there is more than that that is happening. Now, what do you think of aside from the population and all that? When you think of Egypt and the weather, what do you think of?
Oh,
Sun.
being an American, I think of pyramids,
True. No, but I mean, like when it comes to weather, it's sunny.
sunny and hot and dry.
Yes. So, uh, so solar in there, that will be something that is definitely like the energy is available. However, it's going to be what is the cost for panels and so forth. And then again, everything was subsidized. Also, electricity was subsidized. So if somebody was going to get their own solar panel and all that, might not make sense because it will be saying to somebody who are paying, like $50 for electricity, and now you have to pay $2,000. Like it's not going to make any sense.
Now, you mentioned a dust problem before, and I interviewed somebody
Yes.
last week about Mars and solar on Mars, and there's a problem with dust on Mars. Would dust be a problem for solar panels in Egypt, or is the dust primarily at ground level, and if you have solar panels on the roof, it'd be less affected?
No, definitely it will be a problem, but it will be a thing where it's needed, where you have to go and wipe them, or somebody will have to go and wipe them. I don't know if I would say washing them because washing in the water is not going to be that readily available.
So that's where we're using.
But
that's where we're using the child labor. We'll have them climb up on the roof and clean them.
Yeah. And then here's another thing: is from what I understood about solar panels, is they are rated for the 25 degrees Celsius. So as the temperature increases, they become less effective. I don't know by how much. And actually, the other way around, as it gets cooler, they become more effective.
Well, that could be an engineering thing where somebody could design solar panels that are more effective in hot environments, right? Or is that a physics thing that can't be defeated?
No, it's definitely there's different ways. So one way of using solar and on a big scale, and that is using the thermal concentration.
Yeah.
So you're not using the actual photovoltaic, but you're using a tower and then all the mirrors reflecting on that.
I don't know if you know this, but in Florida, it's fairly common for people to use a solar system on their roof to heat
the water,
to heat the swimming pool, and I think that's very common in third world countries as well. That they basically put black pipes filled with water on the roof, and the sun heats the. Correct? Is this common in Egypt as well?
Actually, in Egypt, you need the energy to cool the water, not to heat it.
Okay.
I'm just making a joke here, but one of the ways I'm thinking of is in solving this issue with the heat. So then you'd use some sort of cooling under the solar panels, where you have some, whether it's water or water mixed with glycol or something, to cool the panel, but at the same time you're producing low grade heat, and then using this low grade heat, like in Egypt, I would think, if it's in a big scale project, use that for desalination. So that could be, obviously somebody would have to make the studies, feasibility study, and see like would it be feasible, or at the end like you're adding too much cost and it's not going to be worth it. And then the other aspect I know that you can use the low grade heat is for air conditioning by using absorption chillers and so forth.
Yeah.
Because in the past, we actually lived in an apartment that was on a higher level, and we had balconies on both sides, or three sides. And for us, just the wind going by was, or even just a little air breeze going through, and that was our cooling, mainly in the evening. And but as things developed and everything, like somebody would have a little area and you would tear it down and build a bigger tower in there, and then having things that are 10, 12, 15 stories high, it became common in there. And then everybody's putting in their window or something air conditioning. But they're not efficient in the way that there's no insulation in there. So you get the air conditioning, feels good when you have it running, but as soon as it stops, the walls and everything is radiating heat.
So Afak asks, put this comment. One aspect to Powerwall, which is something I was going to come to, was using energy storage to stabilize the grid in Egypt. One aspect of Powerwall is cost. Lead acid battery plus solar inverter costs 1/7 in Pakistan. Similarly, China imported cells cost 1/3 of Germany imported one. Solar is a success. I think he's in Pakistan, and he's saying the cost of lead acid batteries and solar inverters are much less than importing, and then Chinese solar cells are much less than German cells. But solar, he says solar is a success in the Pakistani market. Do you know if solar is making an impact in Egypt?
Any information I'm getting is just through like reading on the internet. I've seen there are some projects, but I don't think it is at the moment as the big scale as it needs to be. To Tesla, like we think of first when Tesla, we think of cars, but don't forget that Tesla had this gigafactory that is for panels.
Yes, that's in Buffalo.
Yes.
Not far from you, actually.
Exactly. And so I would think where Tesla, when it comes to thinking in the like Middle East or Egypt and the Middle East, the way I would picture them is to come in first as a solution or a problem solver. And probably people will be interested first in the employment that will come from Tesla. And I would see that they would go first to produce like solar panels and so forth. But not just for Egypt.
To produce solar panels in a third world country like Egypt.
Yes.
And for export to other countries around Egypt.
But what's around Egypt? That's exactly. So what's around Egypt? It's all the Middle East countries, like all the
I'm going to go on my limited knowledge of I'm an American, so my knowledge of African geography is limited. But I'm going to go with Libya, Somalia, Sudan.
True, but now on the other side, what you got is you got Saudi Arabia, you got Qatar and Dubai, and all those things.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I've seen there was a proposed project that they're wanting to do this big city. It's going to be bigger than New York in the northern part of Saudi Arabia next to Egypt. And they wanted to, like, the vision is cast that they're going to be all, renewable energy and so forth. So, and then even cars, like if they were to produce cars in Egypt, probably limited number would be for use in Egypt. But until recently, now things have changed, and the coronavirus even changed it worse in the Middle East. But until recently, the buying power in there was a lot more than North America and Europe.
Okay.
Like for anything that is high-priced item, and in there most likely they would import it. They don't like there is not emphasis on producing something in their own soil.
Okay, so I'm just gonna. Afak followed up on his comment. First of all, he's from Pakistan, lives and works in Dubai. He said having even the lead acid system with solar is too expensive for income levels in Pakistan. The return on investment of solar plus batteries is at least 7 years. And he was referring to commercial use, that the solar is a success in the commercial market, like businesses, hospitals, and shops, not at the grid level, because for them, the return on investment is 2.5 years and less because they don't need batteries for storage, and commercial electricity is expensive. So I guess that's one possibility, is that there would be a bigger, first of all, there's different kinds of solar, right? You mentioned there's a kind of solar that's like basically a solar power plant, not something you'd put on your roof, but something that you would put somewhere where you're generating heat and you're using that to turn turbines and generate electricity.
Yes. Yes.
But the idea of solar panels on your roof, a power wall in your garage, if you have a garage, or a mega pack facility that's going to back up the grid, it seems like Afak thinks that's less likely. I wonder, I know the grid is unreliable in Costa Rica. I think the grid is still unreliable in a lot of places. So it seems like there's potential for battery storage to work. And I think the challenge there is getting the cost of batteries down. And then I don't know whether, let's say, opening a gigafactory in a third world country where you're going to produce batteries. I think the primary cost of the batteries is the materials, and that's not, the lithium, the cobalt, whatever is going in the batteries is the primary cost. And that's not going to get cheaper by locating in a third world country. The labor might get cheaper, but labor is not a big component of the cost.
Labor it's yeah, true.
But it's not a big component of the cost. And then, the cost of building the factory might be cheaper because the land is cheap and the labor is cheap. But then you have the problem of, I'm sorry to say this, but when they built a factory in Shanghai, the local labor supply, the local contractors were very, very efficient and delivered very, very quickly. In some third world countries, and I'm thinking about Costa Rica in my head, what I've read, there are some lax attitudes about getting things done on time.
Correct.
That people don't necessarily move quickly. It's hard to motivate people. I wonder if the same thing is going to be true for the third world, that it's really going to be, we're going to see solar and grid storage roll out in first world countries first, wealthy countries first. And then, Tesla is committed to, let's get our manufacturing costs down. Let's get this stuff cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And, the leftovers eventually, the panels that are no longer generating as efficiently, maybe they go to Egypt and Costa Rica, wherever. And the grid storage batteries, when they're no longer as reliable for our grid, they get shipped to somebody else's grid. Do you think that's a path, or is there a path for third world countries to buy new stuff?
In the past, I'm talking about recent past, and even until now, my knowledge of China is limited. But in general, we think of China, or in the past, last 5 years or something. When I think of China, I would think of cheap labor, and like the income in there is low. But now I was surprised to see that how China became the leader in battery electric buses, and having completely one city where all their fleets.
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't think China is really a cheap labor country anymore. I mean, it's not as expensive as the U.S. and say Germany or Canada, but I think labor it's especially for talent. There's a very competitive market in China for labor, and it's challenged. I mean, still, I have programmers in China who do some coding for a website that I have, and I think I pay $25 an hour for the coding, and I'm sure the guy working is getting 15 an hour or 10 an hour. So certainly a coder here in the United States costs more, but this is very low level, not advanced coding either. So. I think that if U.S. companies are outsourcing coding to China, they might be paying half what they're paying, but that wage, half of a U.S. coding wage, would be like a king's ransom in Egypt.
Well, okay, maybe a better way to say it is, in the past, people looked at manufacturing. If there's something that is pure labor, then you say, okay, we're going to do the knowledge part of it and the development and so forth. We do it here in North America. And then we're at some part where just people, you're just told to move it from here to here and so forth, go to one of the other countries in the third world countries where labor is cheap. But it became more and more that you can't just have everything where it's just nothing but labor. You would have to have some CNCs working. You would have to, some technician level knowledge is needed, at least at the beginning. And as that's developing, and then here's another thing too, like in Egypt, education for us was free. So for us to have a university degree in Egypt, as a matter of fact, that is you don't find somebody who finished high school and stopped. It's a common thing. You have not finished school until you finish university. Now, whether you get work in that field or not, that's a completely different question.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, what's the quality of that education? It might be a degree on paper, but at the end, like I think I mentioned to you that in an email, what they are calling university in Egypt might be in the level of maybe a technical school in here, just introduction to some subjects and so forth. And then But if you come in here and you want to take that education and bring it here, you are needing to upgrade. Now things have changed, because obviously when you look at a factory like built in China and so forth, now they're not taking everybody here from North America to go build it there. They have found the local knowledge and so forth. So over the years, things gradually have changed. Even though with the mess that happens in any country, there's advancement that happens.
Okay. Let me just. I just want to. By the way, Afak, I'm gonna read another comment from Afak. And by the way, Afak,
Yeah.
if you keep commenting, you're gonna have to come on and do one of these interviews with me, Afak. So Afak says in Pakistan we have almost 5 gigawatts shortfall in summer. Economically, it makes sense for coal plants, capex wise, capital expenditure wise, unless we get some very cheap loans from the IMF, because if you were going to install 10 megawatts of 10 megawatt hours of solar, you could, for the same price, you could install 100 megawatt hours of coal. That the installation, this is one of the interesting questions that I think is a challenge. It's a challenge here as well, but it's a bigger challenge for third world countries. Is yes, the installation cost of a solar plant might be 10 times as high as the cost of a comparable coal plant. That's true. But the running cost over the next 20 or 30 years of your solar facility versus your coal facility, because you're not paying for coal, because you're not cleaning up, and if you account for it at all, the pollution that's caused by coal or the efforts you make to clean up the exhaust, that the solar is a better bet long run. But these countries just can't afford in the short term, they can't afford the investment to build that big solar plant. Although India is doing it. India is building some very large solar facilities. The very large solar generating facilities. I think there's 4 or 5 of them going right now in India. But I think at the same time, a Fox point is, yeah, that's nice, but they don't really generate that much electricity. The amount of solar you'd have to install, the amount of investment you'd have to make to really solve the problems would be really high. And I think there's a governmental issue, which is, like you said, and I think this is true in a lot of countries, including our country, the United States. I think politicians are more interested in what's this money doing for me than what is it doing for the people. Do you see that this point about it's very difficult to invest in solar in terms of solar and battery backup versus just putting in a coal plant or a natural gas plant, that the cost of installing, because my impression is natural gas can be very, very cheap to build a plant, and they actually have fairly low running costs as well.
And not only that, when you think of, like, say, a place like Egypt, they have now like a big production or big like the discoveries of fossil fuel in there is ramping up. While in here we are talking about bringing it down. So they have the incentive. Okay, we have already companies that are working in that field and so forth. That would be working against the thinking of, we want to get rid of use of fossil fuel, until, like, if somebody demonstrates it, okay, like the same way it's happening in here. So one way, even for me, like, I cannot put solar panels in my roof here because I'm joined with another, like, I'm in a duplex. So, but even if I was like one house by itself, I'll think at it, okay, I'm paying roughly, $150 or whatever in the winter time for electricity, because I don't have gas here in the house. Everything's electric. But at the same time, if a roof is going to cost me, like $50,000, like that's a cost of close to what I paid for the house in the first place. But if the efficiency of it improves, but not just the efficiency of how much electricity that comes from it, but what else can we use with that energy? So that's where the thermal part of it comes in.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, like
sure.
Solar heating. Yeah.
Right. So just real quick, Ben says, and I agree with this, Ben, coal also has a high healthcare cost, not to mention people dying from coal pollution. So, but the problem, Ben, is that there's this short-term problem of the government they need more electricity in the country. And in the short run, the easy way to generate a lot of electricity is to install a coal plant or a natural. I would think natural gas would be a much better choice than coal, but
Yeah.
it's easier to set up a coal plant and get it running in terms of cost. And they don't, and because I'm sorry, I'm very cynical about government. Government is not that interested in the health of its citizens. It's interested in satisfying short-term problems and getting and lining their pockets with money if they can get somebody to give them a kickback when they build the coal plant, the power plant. I'm sorry, I'm very cynical about, and not just, I'm not just talking about third world countries. I'm talking about here too. But listen, I am running out of time. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think I just want to sort of sum up a little bit that the one thing that I'm taking from this conversation is, well, the biggest thing that I'm taking is that it may be that the best prospect for penetration of Tesla's technology of electrical generation, battery storage, electric vehicles is the leftovers from which is what already happens with a lot of things anyway, the leftovers from the first world. If a Tesla gets in a wreck and it's still drivable, but it's considered totaled. Currently, what we do is we take the battery pack that somebody like there's a I can't think of the guy.
Rich Rebuild?
Yeah, Rich Rebuilds. Or there's another guy I can't think of who just announced he's got like lung cancer or something.
Yeah.
That they take the battery pack out and they do something with it. But I could see where, if the vehicle is salvageable, you might ship the vehicle to a third world country and they'll fix it up, put duct tape where they need to put duct tape on and drive it around. I almost wonder that that's the real future. Power stations like the new Blue Eddy, this is a comment, power stations like the new Blue Eddy AC200 with 170 watt solar panels may provide some power requirements. Yeah, Falk talks about other things people burn, like plastic and tires, etc., in third world countries. All right. So anyway, I feel like we've gone a long time, and unfortunately, I have stuff I have to do. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Sam.
Same here.
I want to thank everybody for your comments, Falk and Thaddeus and Ben and Boardcat and Brent. Thank you all for commenting. Hey, listen, if you have any other thoughts, please put some comments in the video below. And of course, hey, if you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe. We got more coming. I have a lot of good live streams coming up and a lot of good videos in the pipeline, so there's going to be some fun stuff coming. So, Sam, thank you very much for proposing the idea and for speaking with me.
Yes.
And thanks again to the audience. Jack Ricard, yes, that's it, Thaddeus. That's the guy I was thinking of. Jack takes the batteries out and does stuff with them. So thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, Sam.
All right.
Stay with me, Sam. So I just